Hey guys, have you been caught shoplifting at your local Sainsbury's? Have you been banned from the store and have you been given these malicious compensation claim letters from Retail Loss Prevention Limited? Don't worry, I'm going to tell you why civil recovery is a scam and why you don't need to pay the claims. So, I'm going to talk about 7 things mainly. What is it? Civil recovery, the basics, the template letters, the legal technicalities, the RLP Oxford test case, the economics of these prosecutions, how to fight back, and the history of RLP's civil recovery and shoplifting. So, what exactly are these letters? Well, it's not a fine, it's not a debt, it is a civil matter. You are not legally obliged to pay these letters. You only need to pay it if you're taken to court and found guilty, which would never happen, as I'll outline later. Let's dissect these compensation claim letters because they seem to be very carefully worded. These are template letters. All of the text has been copy and pasted thousands of times. And they don't show a compensation that is proportional to the incident that took place, because it's a boilerplate letter. For petty theft, you see these numbers 135, 155, 175. There's much larger amounts shown for cases of large-scale retail theft, let's say if you're doing receipt fraud at TK Maxx, or if there's an employee suspected of stealing a Snickers bar. This is a image of one such compensation claim. As we see here, on the top, this person has not paid the compensation claim, and so he's received what looks like his second or third letter. And these letters, they basically say, ignoring the matter won't make it go away. It's not in your best interest. And they'll say, we're gonna pass the information to the police. Oh no! Of course, the police don't give a shit about petty theft because of the Tory budget cuts and the austerity. I've also read dozens of articles on shoplifting, and one of the causes of the shoplifting epidemic is basically the police don't give two shits about petty theft. If it's under £200, they won't investigate. So you may be wondering, why am I being charged so much money? Well, RLP has anticipated this question many times, and they've created a Q&A on their website. And so, on this question, they say, the cost of crime to a business is vast. The cost of loss prevention measures is only incurred by a business because people steal and commit other wrongdoings. If no one stole, these costs would not be necessary. Loss prevention's personal times is one element of contribution sought. There are other necessary tasks undertaken after a person has left the store, including paperwork and reporting procedures, arranging inspection of goods, and authority for replacement back to stock and accounting to management. Further, other personnel, such as administrative staff, shop floor staff, and management are also engaged on these procedures, diverting them from the profit-generating activities for which they are engaged and paid. Our clients also invest millions of pounds on security systems and technology which is necessary to enable detection of wrongdoing and the lawful processing thereafter. Courts readily award retailers a contribution for such costs. Now, all of this is complete bullshit. At the end it says courts readily award retailers a contribution for such costs. No, they don't. Courts only award for the value of goods stolen or damaged. They are not going to award for staff time spent on dealing with shoplifting incidents, and I'll get onto this with the Oxford RLP test case. And of course, earlier it does say something like, shop floor staff and management are also engaged on these procedures, diverting them from the profit-generating activities for which they are engaged and paid. This is not true. And this has likely been inserted there to counter the Aerospace Publishing versus Thames Water precedent, which I'll explain later. If any of you have witnessed a shoplifting incident, you know that there's only about 1 or 2 members of security who are engaged with the shoplifter. And these security people, they would be doing nothing if the shoplifting incident did not take place. So, yeah, this is a lie. It also says that there's many tasks taken after a person has left the store, such as arranging the inspection of goods and authority for replacement back to stock, and accounting to management. This is likely false. The reason why these tasks are listed is so then the retailer has an excuse to charge higher compensation claims. In the Oxford RLP test case, the security staff on site said that they spent half an hour arranging the inspection of goods and a whole hour reporting to management. And as they later admitted, none of this happened. It was bullshit. If you were to email RLP and ask them for a breakdown of these costs, they would usually give you this. Time is £80, security is £50, and administration is £30. The security cost is bullshit, because security equipment is a one-time expenditure. You pay for security to be installed, you pay for CCTV to be installed, and that's it. And time, as in the security time being used in dealing with the incidents, that does exist, yes, but it does not amount to £80 or anything like that, because security staff are paid about £10 an hour. How do I know this? Well, go on Indeed.com, go on any job site and type in security guard, and you'll get these numbers. And finally, you have administration costs of £30. This is likely non-existent, because sending an email does not count as administration. Let's talk about the law and why these prosecutions would never work. In 2007, there was the Aerospace Publishing versus Thames Water Utilities case. Basically, a pipe burst, the offices were flooded of a company, and Thames Water did not want to pay a compensation claim because most of the claim was over-exaggerated because it contained a lot of staff time costs. And the judge ultimately dismissed the claim because an organisation can't claim compensation on staff time, especially when the staff are not diverted from their active duties. Remember this, kids. This is important for later. RV the Sichuan case is echoing this precedent, in which it basically says that there must be evidence that the staff was diverted from their active duties, and that the active duties otherwise would have made revenue for the organisation. The compensation claims are based on staff time being used on the incident, plus overall security costs that the retailer spends every year on, operating the security in these branches. And no part of these legal claims would be upheld in court. Because as I just said, the aerospace publishing precedent, the only thing that is valid to claim on is the value of goods stolen or damaged. However, this is always going to be £0 in every case, because when shoplifters are caught, the value, all of the goods are recovered. When shoplifters are caught, the goods are recovered, which means there's nothing that they can claim on. And you may think, oh, but what about the previous times that they've come to the store unstolen? Security are not going to have footage saved of the incident, or rather, they will not they wouldn't have archived that footage. One of the reasons is that security don't give a shit, but also, if you look at incentives, security are not going to record a successful shoplifting incident because they would have to admit to their manager that a shoplifter went in their store, taken something, and left, and they did nothing about it. Just imagine that you're a security guard and a homeless guy walks into the store, grabs a carton of eggs, and runs out. You could record that shoplifting incident, but if you do, well, you would have to tell your manager that you did absolutely nothing, and that would make you look like a silly little ballsack. Next is the Oxford RLP test case that happened in 2012, more formally known as A Retailer versus Miss K and Miss B. So here's the context of this case. There were two females who did not pay a compensation claim, both around £135 in value. Retail Loss Prevention Limited tried to prosecute them, aiming to get the compensation claim, aiming to get the thing paid. Here's a quote. If this was anything other than a test case, it would have been impossible for the claimant to reconcile the value in bringing it. Lawyers familiar with the case estimate that a retailer's litigation costs were in the region of £20,000 for a claim worth £137, plus up to £100 in costs. Kate was a woman with severe mental health issues, and so the compensation was reduced to £90 beforehand. Kate is Miss K, by the way. There's a really interesting thread on the Legal Beagle's legal forum. So, in this case, the claimant, which is the retailer, claimed that the incident took 6 hours 45 minutes of staff time, hence the high compensation cost. The name of the security staff was Mrs. Kent. This incident took place at 4 p.m. when the store was closing at 8 p.m. And the defense found this quite unusual because if the incident took 6 hours 45 minutes, then the incident ended 2 hours, almost 3 hours after the store closed. And it doesn't make sense. This security officer was working almost until midnight? How does that make any sense? A second security guard, called Tony Cummings, said that he worked 2 hours on this incident. The 9 collective hours multiplied by £10 equals £90, hence most of the compensation claim is spent on this staff time. But an interesting quote I found here from a forum says, however, under cross-examination by the defendant's counsel, Mrs. Kent eventually conceded that she had in fact spent at most just 1 hour and 10 minutes dealing with the incident. Similarly, Mr. Cummings later conceded that he had spent at most 35 minutes assisting Miss Kent. This is perjury. Applying the revised hourly pay rate cited by the claimant during the trial hearing, this gives a total cost of no more than £23, or just 90% of the £118 asserted by the claimant as the actual cost of Miss Kent and Mr. Cummings' time. However, this pathetic claim amount was not even considered by Judge Harris because of the aerospace publishing case precedent. So the claimant also tried to get £30 of compensation for the security equipment costs. This large retailer spends £1.3 million every year on security, and divide that by the 35 detained shoplifters. Somehow you get to this £30 cost. However, Harris expressed his view that the tort of the defendants did not cause the shop to install the CCTV. It was already there. So ultimately, the case was dismissed and RLP got humiliated. The website, RLP's website, listing their successful unrepresented prosecutions, was later taken down by themselves, having realized that every past prosecution may be in jeopardy. No prosecutions of the type ever took place ever again. Because of the lies told in their case, RLP is potentially liable for perjury and fraud by false representation. Under the 2006 Fraud Act, a person is in breach of a section if he makes a fraud representation, and a representation is false if it is true or misleading, and they know that it is true or misleading. RLP practices fraud by false representation to maximize their compensation claims. If they didn't, the compensation claims would be so low that the compensation claims would be not even worth the value of the paper that they are printed on. For example, most of these incidences take 20 minutes. 20 minutes of security time that is paid £10 an hour. What is that? A third of 10. £3? That's not even worth the value of a second-class stamp that RLP sends to you in these compensation letters, and we'll get onto that later. Let's talk about the economics, because sometimes economics supersedes the law. If a case is too expensive to prosecute to get too little back, then it's not going to be followed up. As stated earlier, the RLP test case costed £20,000 in legal fees, and much more in reputational damage. I don't have a source for this, but 65% of people at the time did not pay their compensation claims, and because of this case, it's probably 90%. The reputational damage, I would estimate hundreds of thousands of pounds. Because this is a private case, solicitors need to be hired for a prosecution. And according to a website, a solicitor costs £100 an hour minimum. Let me ask you, would you spend £300 just to get a £150 compensation case claimed? And the effective return would be negative. You'd be losing money because these cases, they would be dismissed in court. As I said, fraud by false representation. So, what you could do, you legally could walk into Waitrose, steal less than £200, take a big shit at the floor while you're at it, walk out, and nothing would happen. If the police don't come, then that's it. You've got away scot-free. Because it would be too expensive for them to do anything about it. How to fight back. Now, if you go on Retail Loss Prevention Limited's website, you may find their email address and phone number at the top. Now, this is where the fun begins. If you're tech savvy, you could perform email bombing. But for legal reasons, you shouldn't do it because, you know, whatever. Or, much more simply, you could just go onto scam websites, porn websites, payday loan websites, newsletters, and sign up using their email address. If you do that, their email inbox would be cooked. Given that their organization is fraudulent, this is perfectly legal. You are allowed to destroy or damage property if it means doing justice for the sake of the public. Furthermore, you could call their phone number and tell them to fuck off. Again, it's not a crime, and it'll make you feel better doing so. You could also email them. These letters may be intimidating, so it would be wise to make them stop. I had a friend who emailed them, he disputed their claim, and you told them that you wouldn't pay. And if you do this, they'll most likely stop. Why? Because every compensation claim they give you costs £1 at least because of the second-class stamp. It also wastes their time. It takes them like 20 minutes for them to respond to your emails. So if you waste their time, they'll have less time to scam other people. So why not do it? Let's talk about the crimes of civil recovery. There's fraud by false representation, harassment, breach of the GDPR. Yeah, so who runs RLP Limited? Well, so RLP is a profit-seeking organization, a very small organization that's been running since 2003. It originally was created as a non-profit with a different name, but Jackie Lambert took over it in 2003 and transformed it into a very sinister enterprise. Her accomplice is Louise Arnold. There's not much information shown on LinkedIn, and this is the only other name that I can come up with. There was another person called Tom Megan, who has since left the company. And anyway, using this info, you can guess their email addresses, you know, first name dot second name at lossprevention.co.uk. By doing this, you can write letters to them personally, you can say that they are going to prison, you could tell them to drop your compensation claim or else. You can even tell them that if they don't stop threatening you, you can find out where they live and do something to them. Anyway, also there was this funny article I read on BBC where basically, you know how on these legal forums a lot of people are sharing their anger about the civil recovery scam. Well, Jackie Lambert and RLP tried to prosecute these legal forums for defamation, and of course this I don't know if you call it a prosecution because it didn't even go anywhere. And you know these people who ran the organization basically told them to fuck off, and that was that. It just goes to show how butthurt these people are. Someone calls out their scam, and they're trying to sue them for defamation. Unfortunately, this isn't India. You can't just cry defamation. You can't just cry defamation whenever you want. You know, unless if I'm Donald Trump and you're Jean E. Carroll, this defamation wouldn't go anywhere, would it? Anyway, it's a legal scam. Do not pay. And finally, I'm gonna wrap up this video by telling you the brief history of shoplifting. So in the 90s, CCTV was being rolled out everywhere, and a lot of people got caught for shoplifting. And the police were called a lot to many stores to, like, detain shoplifters and arrest them and whatever. But, you know, I guess since the 90s, the 2000s, and definitely after the 2007 crisis, austerity came about and the police's resources were constrained. And it was really painful for them to having to arrest people who stole very low value items, which these items were recovered anyways. And it did lead to the Antisocial Behaviour Act in 2014, which basically made it a summary offence to steal less than £200. And the summary offence is basically something which the police will not look into. It can only lead to some sort of punishment if there's a private prosecution taking place. Anyway, in 2002, civil recovery was legalized as a private method to mitigate shoplifting. However, tens of thousands of people since then have been given these compensation claim letters. And because a lot of these recipients are either poor, innocent, or just mischievous people, a lot of people didn't pay these compensation claims, and a lot of them were asking questions and seeking legal advice online. And so, because of this, anyone who gets given a compensation letter today, they can just go online and go on a forum where a bunch of people say, don't pay the compensation, nothing will happen if you don't, it's a scam, don't pay up. And this is why civil recovery only claims £16 million every year, when shoplifting affects the economy in the area of £2 billion. £16 million is less than 2%. It's less than 1% even than £2 billion. So, if you think about it, civil recovery is one of the worst methods ever imagined to deal with the problem of shoplifting, because shoplifting is done by people who are just too poor to pay these egregious claims. And it's all based on the idea of fear, that people are too stupid to Google retail loss claim on the internet, where someone can say, don't pay. And yeah, the problem's gone really bad since 2022, and now we have a shoplifting epidemic. If you want to read more about this, you can go on the Citizens Advice Bureau website, where you can find a document called Uncivil Recovery. This is a document that provides hundreds of anecdotes of innocent people who have been given these threatening compensation claims. And just to magnify the emotional effect that these claims have on people, when people are being given these letters asking them to pay ridiculous sums of money or else they'll be prosecuted, it really does hurt people's mental health. And a lot of people who get accused of shoplifting have histories of mental illness, and it feels very unsympathetic, this whole scheme. Um, yeah. And also, people who have mental health issues, they often forget to scan items in the self-checkout. So these shoplifters, they could be people who are actually paying for items, but they just didn't scan all their items. And that, there's a funny anecdote where in Canary Wharf there was a guy who was banned from Canary Wharf because he bought a bunch of stuff at the Tesco's. However, he forgot to scan pork ribs at the self checkout, and it's so fucking dumb how these, the security staff and the civil recovery firms, they try to prosecute people and threaten them just because they didn't scan a Snickers bar. Like, Jesus Christ. Anyway, that's it with the video. Goodbye.